Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today's guest is Stu Turner, a creative dynamo who serendipitously found his way into advertising back in South Africa and climbed the ranks to become Group Executive Creative Director at VML Australia. Stu's journey is rich with unique experiences and invaluable insights into advertising, creativity, and production. He emphasises the critical role of production teams, highlighting the importance of involving them early in the creative process to ensure the ideas are both practical and on budget. Stu shares what makes a great producer: creativity, problem-solving skills, and the ability to enhance ideas while maintaining feasibility. He also notes the best producers are those who offer solutions that elevate the final product. In this conversation, Stu discusses the evolving dynamics between creative and production roles, the importance of flexibility, and the necessity of a collaborative approach within agencies. He shares anecdotes about working with producers who transformed seemingly impossible ideas into successful projects, emphasizing the value of trust and open communication. Join us as we delve into the world of advertising with Stu Turner, learning from his journey, his insights on production, and his vision for fostering a collaborative and innovative creative process. Stu Turner. Stu Turner, thanks for jumping on, mate. Appreciate you taking the time. Start off with, could you introduce yourself and share a bit about your journey as a creative and then to becoming the ECD at VML?
Yeah, sure. So, as you can probably tell from my accent, like originally South African, didn't think I was going to be a creative ever, and was managing restaurants and, dealing with people on a whole nother level, and thought I was going to go that way. And then a friend of mine that I did a BCom in marketing with, and I had no interest in that when I was studying it, but he, I passed eventually. And then he came to me one day and he said, "Look, mate, I've been in advertising like 2-3 years now, and I reckon you're a creative and I reckon you're a copywriter." He knew me quite well. And I was like, okay, what the heck is that? Never heard of it at all. Long story short, looked into it. There was an ad school that, in Johannesburg at the time when I was in South Africa, was the last person to scrape in a post-grad course, moved everything up to Johannesburg, studied it for a year, and then got a job straight away afterwards, and then just never looked back. So it was kind of this whirlwind falling into it as a creative, because I think as most creatives, you just don't believe you're creative. You have an imposter syndrome. And then moved to Australia about 14 years ago with my art director partner, and then have slowly climbed up, to creative director and then ECD. Was given a chance to be ECD with a partner of mine a few years ago, in 2017, I think it was, and managed to do really well with that, and then split on our own and kind of went our own way. And now at VML as Group ECD, which means I kind of look after a few offices and accounts spread across the country. And that came as a result of, I was at Wunderman Thompson, and we merged with VML YNR to become one VML. So that's my whole journey in very few shorter time. But it's I suppose the point of saying that is it's a bit of a speckled kind of past. Only started studying creativity, became a copywriter at age 27. So it was a bit of a late start.
So give us a bit of an insight into, you said creative team. So within advertising, can you give us what a team role, what the roles are within a team? I know there's a copywriter and then there's a art director. Can you give us a bit of an idea about what those two people bring to the team?
Yeah, so I think historically and classically, it's obviously words and pictures to put it very basically. But I think it's also just the coming together of two minds who can brainstorm together and kind of figure out an idea and the narrative of that idea and how it looks and how it sounds and how to pitch it and everything. And so people are always just trying to find, we just need to put a copywriter with an art director. But I found I struggled to find a partner for my first few years. And then I found this guy, Darren, and we were super successful together for many years because we just got each other's skill set. And we just, for the biggest thing I reckon is we were just mates and had so much fun. And so he understood a bit of my world, the writing, and I understood a bit of his world, the visuals. And so together as a team, we would, kind of dip into each other's, spaces a little bit often. But we were like, I always say together we were amazing. On our own, we weren't that well, that good. But together we were incredible. It's like kind of like a 1 + 1 = 3. And most agencies now operate like that, still operate to this day with those pairings. But you do see it changing. Like even now within my team, I've got a few people that work on their own, and I pair them up with different people. So I might put a copywriter with a designer, or a designer with an experienced designer, or something like that. Like there is a lot more mix and match happening. And actually, I've got a guy who's head of tech, who I pair with the head of design, and together they're like this most incredible creative team. And I think that's, again, to my earlier point, it's not just about visuals and words. Yes, that's where it started, but it's more just like, how do you complement each other and like make that magic? And that can come from any kind of pairing. So I was with him for years, and then I was with another guy for a few years, and we became CDs together, and we became ECDs together, and then that kind of runs its course a little, because you've always got to split. Unless the agency's big enough to have two, you kind of want to go your own way. And so I did so a few years ago, and so did he. And that's kind of like the path of an ECD, I suppose, is you eventually end up on your own.
So you start out as a team, traditionally.
Yeah.
You work your way up, and then as your experience grows, I'm assuming you come off the tools, and then you're more managing the people underneath you and managing the ideas. Does that sound right?
Yes, totally. I still love to be on the tools. Like I love writing, and so I still jump in here and there, and often take jobs on my own as like a copywriter and try. And I think my job is now to like try and connect the dots between where people have gaps and ideas or things that can make it better based on like what I've learned or my taste or my experience. But I do think like the job, not many creatives can be managers, and not many managers are good creatives,
Yeah.
So you have to, I think most people, as you progress your career, you have to strengthen the muscles in at least one of those areas, you know what I mean? So I've seen people that are fantastic creators, they just could not manage people, and vice versa, So you've just got to, it does become a whole nother skill set when you start becoming a creative director.
Creative process.
Yep.
How do you and your creative team, or even just how does a creative team approach a new campaign or a project? And can you walk us through from ideation to execution, how it would run traditionally?
Yeah. I think for me, obviously as a ECD and even as a creative director, before the team even gets a brief, you're involved upstream of that with strategy. Well, I certainly love to be. And in that place, like you're dissecting the brief, what's the angles, what's the audience, what's the brand, all that stuff. Like there's so much research and data and thinking that goes into that, and wrestling. By the time a creative team gets it, when I was a junior, I was like, oh, is this the brief? Like it's so easy to dismiss, but you don't understand all the work that's gone into that piece of paper, or that piece of paper that you get in front of you. It's like I carry all of that as an ECD going in when I give it to the team, because I don't expect them to hold all that back information. I've tried to distill it down with the strategy team into something that is like simple and brief and like pointed that the creatives can work off, and it's not always easy to get to that place. But I say that because then the creatives, I let them figure out the questions that I might have the answers for, rather than inundating them with like so much information. Do you know what I mean? And then also I think why that's important is my process, and it's taken a long time to get to this, is in the beginning just completely like divergent thinking, like anything goes. I tell people, don't self-edit, don't worry about certain things. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like be in a safe space to be completely wrong in some things. It doesn't have to be fully formed. And that's a hard place to be for some people, because there's like a fair amount of like vulnerability and trust that has to come into that process. Like, I used to have an ECD that when I showed him ideas, he unless it was completely finished, he'd tell me to get out of his office in very like unpleasant ways, But now I think it's like we move at such pace, and you can miss ideas if you don't. If you're trying to get to an idea that's fully formed and perfect, you probably have fewer than if you had a bunch of rough kind of beginnings of thoughts and we came together and chatted. You might find something that you would have skipped over otherwise. So to answer your question, like I like to go super wide at the beginning while I have all that information where I know we need to get to, but have the freedom for everyone to play and figure it out. And then once we've done that for a space, then I start narrowing down and then giving inputs here. What you might not know, creatives, is this type of fact, so we can't do that. Or this is really good because of this, And then you start, like I said, connecting those dots together. and then you get to that convergent thinking, like classic divergent convergent thinking. So you go wide, and then you start pinpointing down, and then as you're doing it, I like have a couple of few things that I measure creative ideas by, like, and I've stolen this from all my favorite people in advertising, which is like, is it clear? Like, do I understand the idea? Is it relevant? Like, is it relevant for the brand? Is it on strategy? And then third, is it like really interesting? Is it original? Does it feel like it's got a cultural tension in it? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like, I only put that metric on it near the end of that process rather than the beginning. And then I think you've got something, because a lot of people make work that's interesting and probably right strategically, but it's not very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might make something really clear and it's very correct and on brand, but it's just not interesting. So I feel like you have to have all three of those things to make something great.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like, that's the final, like, well, probably halfway through the filter that I put across everything. And then I just like to generally, I mean, I can talk about my process for ages, but I generally like to go, we live in a day and age where we have to put 3 ideas in front of clients for some reason. It's like this unspoken rule. And I'm like, we always put one that's the safe option. And more, I feel like I'm getting to the place, well, I am, in the place where it's just like, I say to creatives, don't put anything in front of people that you don't want to make or sell. Do you know what I mean? Like, just really have it hard, because I think a lot of people feel comfortable with like, oh, these are very risky, but at least we've got the safe one. Like 9 times out of 10, people will choose the safe one, and then you find yourself on shoot making something pretty standard. You go, how do we get here?
Mm-hmm.
So I could talk, like I said, for ages about my creative process. Those are just like my top kind of key things.
Let me ask you, Stu, in this day and age, how quickly are you asked or required to come up with an idea? Can I assume that it's getting quicker and quicker, that you have to get through that creative process?
Oh man, like I remember when I first started, I'm going to sound old here, but when I first started, every brief had like 3 to 4, maybe more weeks on it.
Mm-hmm.
And now some briefs are 3 to 4 days, I reckon. Mm-hmm. And for big stuff, And not only that, there's the complications of just a hugely expanded media, landscape, and, tightened budgets and multiple things to say. So it is harder and harder, and you have to be quicker and quicker. And to just touch on something you said there, like, yes, you're right. The classic way of integrating production was almost at the end of the creative process, like go in a cave in a room somewhere as creatives, come out with something, go into production and go, yeah, can we make this, right? Mm-hmm. You just don't have that luxury anymore, because the production at that point in the past said, oh, we can't do that. We'd go back because we had all the time in the world to kind of fix it, tweak, right? But now you're like, you have to run those things in tandem at the same time, bringing production across everything, because you just don't have the luxury to go back and review or change. So it's funny, that same ECD that I referenced earlier, we used to have a production department in the one part of the agency. Like, you had to walk through this door to get to their area. And he took some spray paint, he was quite wild, and he wrote dream killers across their doorway, because you would always walk in there with your dreams and they would crush them and you have to go back. And that's such an it was funny at the time, but it was kind of old school, And now it's like, it's because of that process. You came to them at the end and then they would say no, yes or no. It was like a yes or no kind of situation. Whereas now, production is way more integrated in the front. And you kind of like iterate with him. We're thinking of this, I'm making it up, but like it might be a guy singing on a mountain in blah blah blah, and we need a cast of 3, and then just roughly, and they're like, oh, that's kind of on budget. You probably can't afford the mountain, but you could do this. You go back, you iterate that into the process as you go. Like even now, I've been working on scripts where they are like 60-70% formed. We bring in production then to go, this is what we're thinking. Some of these might not even live, but tell us what space you're in. Like, is this on budget? What would we need to consider here? And you kind of work together. And again, to my earlier point, that takes a whole nother level of trust from creatives, especially, to go, and production to have like the grace to go, okay, it's not all there. They have to have that like entrepreneurial like insight into it and go, like, I can see where they might be going. I know what they might need. I know where this could go. This is the watch out. And you give them, the creators, enough to like steer them without affecting or crushing or, So yeah, it's just a way more like, because it's so, like, to your point, it's so much more faster and so much more condensed. I don't think there's any other way to work but together along the way.
Okay, so going off what you've just said there, now from your perspective, what qualities make a producer stand out in that agency environment now that you bring them in? So who are the type of individuals, or what are the qualities that those people that you think really, really complement the creative team in that process?
Yeah, I think I don't want to like classify them, but I feel like certain producers and production people are like yes or no. It's quite binary. It's black or white, right? Then you get this other like type which is no, but you can't do that, but you could do this. And then you get the third type, which is my favorite, which is no, but have you thought about this? Like they're suggesting things that could make it better, or do you know what I mean? Like let's just, you can park the yes because there's lots of yeses. I don't want to say it's all no's, but the best part of production is how they help you figure out a problem and make it happen. And that often comes from a no, we can't do that, or we need to do that. Do you know what I mean? And so the best producers I've ever worked with like came up with ideas that made our ideas better, like made the work better. They could see what we were trying to achieve, and without like throwing a suggestion in, they threw the idea off. They threw in a suggestion that was, congruent with the idea, and helped make that idea what it retained its integrity, if I might say. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of an example, but I had had a shoot where it was impossible to create this scene that we wanted, and it was actually integral to the idea. And I think most producers would have said, well, that idea is dead, right? But the producer we had on the thing was like, well, I know this guy who can build this set, and if you shoot it in this way on day one and this day on day two, I think we'll achieve what you want to get to. And it was like, oh my gosh, suddenly something that was way out of budget became, quite easy. And I'm talking broadly, like there's some finer details to how that worked, But we as creators would never have thought of that because we just don't have access to that world. You know what I mean? So I think like a good producer is creative. I think good strategists are creative. I think the best suits are creative because they're problem solving with you along the way. Do you know what I mean? And I know still to this day, a lot of producers, I'm wary to even show them a script because I just know it's going to be no, too hard. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, that's crazy. And it's like, hey, I'm coming to you and I've got some flex. Can you have some flex too? Don't be so stiff. And I say that to the creatives as well. It's not just on production, right? Creatives walk into producer's office or open plan and go like, hey, we've got the script. I go, you need to go in with a bit of an open hand. Like, be open to something changing. Listen to them. Like, figure it out. Don't go, it has to be this or the highway. Do you know what I mean? Like, So I think there's like a rigidity of old that we need to let go of, and a more of a loose kind of malleable openness to work together and figure out a solution, because that's the only way to survive together and make something great,
Why do we think that is the case in agency land? Why do we think that it is a hard no, the idea can't be made, rather than a no, but have you thought of this, or let's try and work with you on that?
I think this is one answer in my opinion, is I think in this industry it's so chaotic, right? We are victims of this chaos, right? We can't plan the opinions of our clients. We can't plan the state of the market. We can't plan what's going to change tomorrow. Like ideas die, ideas live every single day. It's just absolute chaos, right? There's very little order, and a lot of people in this industry can't deal with that amount of like kind of free fall chaos, right? They strive to find like order and rules and ways to and process, right? Mm-hmm. And I think even creatives, I see some creatives, they like a process, they like to do this and then it does this and then we do this, and it's like they can't even surrender themselves to that process, which I always say, guys, surrender to the process. Let go a little bit and see what happens. Stop fighting with it and trying to make it something. And I think it's a long way around to answer it, which is I think you get to people where they're like, this is by the book, this is how it's done, and they're so scared to like think outside of that scenario. It's really hard actually for some people to think like that, because this is the way it's always been done, right? This is the way I know how to do it. When you're presented a problem that you don't know how to do, it's quite confronting for creatives and production, right? You feel scared, like, but I kind of always just go lean into it. Like, what is like, that is an insane challenge. How could we make that work? Like, and 9 times out of 10, you get to a better place. You actually get to something better when you lean into that, instead of being like, oh no, we have to kill that, start again, right? And I think people, to answer your question, I think people are just afraid of like, oh, this doesn't fit in line with my predetermined way of doing things. Mm-hmm. And so I can't actually think outside the box. It's too much more work, do you know what I mean? Or it's just chaotic. Bit of old school there, but also I think it's a personality thing. And fair, it's a fair thing to feel, I think, as creative people in this industry, to just want it to go a certain way and to not be a pain, Whereas like, I think we're not, we're not artists, but we are creating together. And any creative endeavor has pain and suffering along the way to make it great, And I just think like some people are averse to that and walk away and try and run away from that, and hide behind process and rules and stuff to protect them. And that's fair. But I think that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. I know from my own experience, when things are so busy and you get thrown something new, you already cast your mind off into the future and think, shit, this could take, and it never does. It never pans out.
Yeah, but you imagine the world of pain coming your way.
Of course. You imagine the world of pain, and then the easiest way to be is, no, I just don't think that's going to work. So
Yes.
I can understand that.
Yes. But I think as well, like I think it's also a large part is on creatives, because I think the reason about why you're doing this podcast is to educate people. I think creatives also lack some education of like I get senior creatives presenting me scripts that we just cannot afford on the budget that they've been given. Right? I said to creative directors, like, do you know what the budget is? They're like, no. I'm like, then how are you even like thinking like this? You really need to know that stuff, so that at least when you're going to production, you're not a child coming to a parent and going, oh, let's, buy a Lamborghini. It's like, no, you actually have to understand how it all works, right? So at least when you come, you've thought of some things. And I think that's the mark of like true, mature, well-rounded creatives, is to expose yourself to how much things cost, how long things take, what type of access we can get, how much celebrities cost, what does music take to make, all this, putting an audio track on versus buying an audio track versus like making your own, like whatever, all those type of things have cost and time implications that I don't think enough creatives understand. And I think they should be, and then to your point, where are the resources for which they can do that? For me, it's always just been, as I've learned along the way, and also investigating. Like I read about, I used to read Shots magazine all the time and how they made stuff, where they made stuff. I'm always talking to production about, even on jobs I didn't have, like in big agencies I worked on, I saw some guys flying to Prague to shoot an ad. When they got back, I asked the producer, like, how much did it cost? Where did you stay? What was the director? How much is their fee? Like, I'm figuring it all out. You've got to be curious into that world if you are to be working in that world, I think. And that goes a long way then to making production's life much easier, because they've got someone who understands their world, at least in part. They don't have to know everything, but they should know some things,
Obviously, production need to be able to assist creative in all those different areas, give them advice, give them information. Do you feel that the teams come together enough within a production, like within agencies? Do you feel like there's enough integration between them, or can there be more done?
Oh, I definitely think there can be more done. I also find it's so comes down to personality thing. Me personally, like I just find like the best strategists, I feel like strategists in production are the same relationship I have, where we're like, I can feel when someone's treating me as like departmental, like you're there, I'm here. Do you know what I mean? And then I can feel the opposite, which I love, is where I feel like we're together and we're partners, And I feel like so much more of that can happen. And creatives sit on ideas and hold them really tight. Don't mess with my little children, And then they get super defensive and like spiky against other people. And I'm like, that I can understand it, but that's not the way to be. And some agencies still do work like that and it's a little bit toxic, and I don't think it makes for the best work. But it's like, you do your job, just make sure it's thing. I'll tell you yes or no. We'll make it happen. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I just think like the way of not even the future, but of now, is that collaborative, open, like willingness to like bend process. Do you know what I mean? And I do think I've still seen it in some agencies today where I'm like, I've in the recent past spoken to some people at previous agencies and gone like, have you spoken to production about this? And they're like, no. I'm like, why not? They're like, sit 2 desks away from you. Go and talk to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I think it definitely can be better. Like what I love about VML, where I am now, one of the offices, two of the offices that I sit in, the production people sit with the creatives, like literally on the same desk line. And I think that's awesome. Like they banter, they go to the pub together. Like it's they become one and the same. When I first joined the one office, I thought that the production person was a creative because they were so integrated, like personally. But like you said, it doesn't happen everywhere. But I think I would suspect the places that make the best work, it is like that.
Stu, let me talk to you about qualities of a good director. So what qualities make a director stand out in the creative environment, and can you quantify that?
Yeah, I think anyone you ask this question that's been in this industry a while will say like probably the cliches. They want a director who's collaborative, and they want a director who brings something extra to the job. Like those are the two things I always hear. Like we need someone that we can work with that's not a prima donna or like super precious or super protective about stuff or hard to work with. And whenever creators are asking for a treatment, and even through the whole production and post-production, they're wanting that additive nature from a director, right? And I feel for directors because when they treat, they know that. They know that they have to bring something to this. And often what they bring is a risk because it could throw the entire treatment off and they might not get it. And I feel that pain. It's the same for us when we pitch on clients. Like, unless we're putting in something safe, we're often putting in something that we don't know if the client will like. And it comes down to one meeting, one pitch, and it's yes or no. It could kill you or it could make you. And I've seen directors win a job on one thing, and I've seen directors lose a job on the tiniest one thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's such a fine line to balance. So the best directors that I've had in the past are those two things. Like they're willing to put something in there that feels like they've added something to it, not for the sake of adding, but actually make it better. You can actually feel when a director puts in something that is just, you've just tried to throw something in, like, it doesn't really make sense. You're just trying to be additive, but you haven't made it better. So I look for that. And then I can quickly tell on a call, in a treatment presentation from them, I can tell usually if this person, because I'll ask a few questions, and based on those responses, I can see, is this person collaborative? I want them to have a backbone. I really want them to stand for what they believe. But I want them to I want to feel like, I could work with this person, or they're thinking about other things and we could spitball on stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then the third thing I think is, and you only know this when you get to the actual job, is I once shot this series of comedic scripts, and there were 3 different scripts and 3 different scenes, and we had some dialogue, for each of them, and each one was like a joke and stuff. And when I got to set, I was standing behind the camera with the director, and he pulled out a notebook, and he had a notebook full on every scene, on every different thing that could be said in every different word, and a whole bunch of alternative lines that I hadn't even thought of. And he was just like, he said to me, "Do you mind if we try something?" So I was like, "Geez, go for it." And he just made this thing, and I reckon 80% of those made the final cuts, and they made it better. It was like owning it, and as if it was his, not just delivering a product. So yeah, I think directors, like, gone are the days where you are stubborn, hard to work with, and just like my way or the highway. You still get those people, and they're probably the most prolific. You know what I mean? And you get them because you want them to be that thing, and you can't really argue. But I don't think we can work with those people anymore nowadays.
So let's talk about directors' input. It's 2 parts. How much creative leeway do you afford a director in terms of interpreting and adding to the initial concept? First question. And then the second, have you got an example where the director's, unique vision enhanced the project significantly?
Yeah. So I think this is advice to creatives and production. I think, be very clear when you're briefing a director, for them to come back with a treatment. Be very clear where the opportunity to build on the idea is. Like, I'm a big fan of going, these are the mandatories, we're never going to get away from that. We have to have this, we have to show this, that has to say this, whatever, Mm-hmm. But we are open to, like, what's the narrative thread that holds it together? Or is there like a visual metaphor that we can drop in? Or we're open to an editing style that we haven't seen before, or this could take a multi-layered multimedia approach. Like, all these things, you just got to be clear to the director so they know where they can flex. Otherwise, they're just shooting in the dark. I don't think it's fair for them, Or even give them a problem. Like, say, we love this script, but can you feel when we were giving you the script, it doesn't have that key moment, or that, like, one line you might remember, or that, like, visual thing that will make it stand out. Like, can you help us with that? That's what we're looking for. Give the director somewhere where they can play and add their magic to it. Because if you just say, yeah, here's the thing, and just come back with something, we'd love to see what you do, that's just not good. You're never going to get something. I think it's very risky, and it's not fair. Whereas if you give them the areas to play in, I think that's just a better way to get to result. Mm-hmm. And the second part of your question is, I think, with I once had this script that we pitched. It was the best treatment I ever had, which was the guy. Can I name people on this podcast?
you can. I don't mind if you do, but you don't have to. You don't have
to. Okay.
You can drive them out. You can do whatever you want, mate.
Okay. Well, so to answer the second part of your question, has a director ever come with something that, if I'm listening to what you said, like, really added value or, like, blown us away? And we did when I was at Havas many years ago, we had a script for the Air Force, and director Joshua Walker, JH as we call him, he said to us, this treatment's not going to like fit on a page or in a booklet. I need you to come to our offices. So we drove it to the office and we went into this room, and I'll never forget, he had this like wall of post-it notes, and like it was like the scramblings of a crazy detective, like all these things connecting, right? And he got up and he pitched it like in a way that I'd never ever heard before. Like he was able to take us through every little post-it note, every little thing, and he had this like visual idea that he wanted to thread throughout that we had never thought of. And in that moment, I guess this is the lesson I'm realizing as I say it, is I could feel the ad. I could feel the script. You know what I mean? Like I could see it already. And even when he made it, it was even better than what he pitched in that room. But in that moment, I could feel the entire thing. And I think sometimes with treatments and directors, like I understand what you're going to do with lighting. I can understand what you're going to do with this thing, but I can't feel it as like one piece. Maybe that's a little bit on me, but they often always try to like redo the script at the end and write it with everything in consideration. But I just sometimes, like every time I've like awarded a director or like an agency, we said that's the one, is when we all go, oh, he just gets it all. It's just like, I feel it in my guts, right? And so that's not to say that you need to do that every time for creators, but I think what can you do to make them feel like you understand this and it's going to be great, and they can actually read it off the page or the document or whatever, where they are like wowed by something, you know? I think too often I've seen so many treatments back and it's just, that's what we gave you, or you didn't even listen to what we asked. Like it just feels like you phoned it in a little bit, you know what I mean? Or you got someone, your research assistant, to do it up and you kind of just signed it. So I think as astute creatives in this industry, you can detect that stuff pretty quickly, and you can tell when someone wants it. That's the other thing, last thing. I could tell that he wanted it so bad, not from a desperate point of view, but because he knew how good it could be, as did we. Like I've spoken to some directors that didn't get jobs, and they were like, yeah, my treatment wasn't great, like, or they're like honest, you know, like, oh, I just, you know, could feel it was thin on this, and I'm like, yeah, like I didn't know that, but I could tell that. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's the same with work. Like there's nothing more disheartening than losing a pitch when I thought it was like the best work we'd put forward. But that's the best place to lose, right? Is when you gave it, like, you know, it doesn't have to, and I'm not talking about length of work, right? I've seen treatments that are like 6 pages that were outstanding because it's just like, oh, it's so good, you know? Like it's not about that. Like, and so I think people do know, you know, I had a huge heavy hitter, top of a production company phone me and go, why didn't, you know, this person get that, like they wanted to ask me, they were mates with me, you know? And I said, you've got to understand, like I saw this other treatment, you'll see it when the ad comes out. Then when the ad comes out, he goes, okay, I see what you mean. You know what I mean? Like they understand. Like, and I just said to him, and he's a really good friend, I said, like, I will always award the best work and the best idea rather than like a mate or a name or a production house, you know? So I try and actually even remove the names of the production house and the director off the treatment and just look at the work. I don't think everyone does that, but I think that's a good way to like test it. And it's a roundabout way of saying the same thing that I said at the beginning. It's just like, I can feel it in the work if they are in it or not. You know?
Advice for newcomers, for those starting their careers in an agency production team, Stu, what advice would you give them?
Gee, it's hard, eh? Like, I think it's the same as creatives. It's like choose your first agency and your first mentors or the people that you work with wisely, because they will color you and affect you for the rest. Like I've seen people that started out in very creative places have turned out to be super creative, you know, their whole life, talking about creatives. And I've seen people that started in like really boring kind of retail or process-driven places. It shaped them, right? So I think when you're starting out, I always say to people, don't look at the name on the door. Look at the names working behind that door. Who's the production person and the creative leader that you're going to be learning from and be around, and look at the work that they're making and do some research on their reputation, you know, because they could be in a very like, you know, agency that needs a lot of work, but you'll be learning from them, not from the agency. Do you know what I mean? So I think just choose wisely where you go, and don't be afraid to make anything. Like people go, I want to go there because they're making big 2-minute epic ads, you know, or this place, you know, and they go, I don't want to go to that place because they're shooting everyday content. I'm like, geez, both are good to learn, man. You need to learn both, and you'll learn, even if you're making lots of like retail ads or whatever it might be, you'll learn a lot about the process. So I think pick who you go for. What's that old adage? It's like, you're there to learn, not earn. One day you'll learn and earn, but you're there just to learn. So don't go for, you know, the big money and the lights and stuff. And then I think just self-motivate yourself and self-learn and teach yourself, you know, read everything, ask questions, look into it, become like someone who understands all parts of it. rather than like feeling like you just have to stick in your lane. Figure out what their job is, how much a job costs, how things are made. Do a retrospect on jobs. Like ask people. Like I think people are willing to talk and teach, but not a lot of people are willing to ask and like be vulnerable and go, I didn't know this. Can you teach me about that? Don't be afraid of that. I think just be willing to look stupid for a while. It's just like production is like, and I say this to creative and producers as well, is like, it's one of the best, most awesome, like part of our jobs is actually the production and the making, because that's when we actually create, right? And so I just say to people, don't forget, like, it's hard what we do, but geez, it's fun. And like I know a lot of my friends have to wear chinos and collared shirts every day to work and like do the same boring thing, and like credit to them, and they'll probably do better than me, but I feel like I'm happier. No offense to them. And I feel like we forget sometimes that although it's hard and it can be frustrating and chaotic, it's one of the most amazing, like fruitful, interesting, always changing jobs that you can have. So like I'm like a massive fan for it. And there's so much commentary online about the changing nature of our industry and people bagging on how it's like, I'm like, adapt or die. Do you know what I mean? And I say that like with this hard stoic edge, but I'm also like, remember how awesome it is and be grateful for like I've gone on shoots with submarines and I've shot things in the air, helicopters flying, but I've also like made terrible toothpaste ads like in a studio that I'd be embarrassed to show anyone. But both of them I had fun and learned something, and it's like no one that I know outside of advertising has those experiences. So I'm like, above all, just remember it's a lot of fun and it's a cool job still.
Stu, thanks so much for joining us. Really insightful. Thoroughly enjoyed the chat. Some great words of wisdom that I'm sure a lot of newcomers will gain insight from. And just thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Well, that's it for today. I'll make the logo bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.